woodcraft, helping you make woodwork.
Okay, they're completely able to be flattened with hand tools as well. Okay, this is important because this is the solid connection to the sole of the plane. Okay, now the sole of the plane, and I always remove the blade when I'm doing tune-up work. You need to try and flatten this here. It's going to be kind of difficult, but this is the connector to the frog right here that sits. And that's going to determine how well your cut is going to be in the wood. Okay. What I also do is I don't lubricate these. I just brush them off. But if there's any, at the time I put machine oil, I just put it on these little surfaces here. It makes it stick really tight and nice, and it prevents any kind of corrosion in between them. Okay. The sole. It's almost fun to flatten the sole on a plane. I use sandpaper on a sanding block, a large square sanding block. We have a couple of those here. And you go through the grits, sanding here, and it doesn't really take long. And the best way to test it is to get a grease pencil or a magic marker and just write squiggles on here and then lap it till they're gone. Okay, and then you can take a square, straight edge, do the flat test, run it along there until you like it. Okay, it's very important. Flat and sharp fixes almost every dilemma in hand woodworking. Yeah, especially sharp. Okay, and that's a sole. And this is, like I was saying before, this is the mouth. And the gentleman was asking about the size of the cut. And that's probably the most technical part of this machine, is adjusting the blade to the type of cut or the type of smooth that you're going to be desiring. Okay, if you're going to want to hog off some knots or burls or any kind of boogers on the wood, you may want to extend it a little bit farther. Okay, but remember, when you start out on your stroke, you're going to have to start back where, if you want to completely smooth it and you want the blade out to take a lot of wood, you're going to have to start back where you connect with that surface before you actually strike the wood as you move the plane along, so you can get a nice smooth cut. Okay. Again, if I'm not going to use the plane, I don't oil or lubricate anything up here on the toad or the front knob, but I would put a light coat of machine oil or your favorite product for preserving steel surfaces, metal surfaces. It's a nice preservative on there if you're not going to be used for a while. Okay, I'll ask for questions again. Did anything pop up, gentlemen, ladies? Okay. If there are nothing else, Sir?
Do you have any of the molding planes that Sandy made for cutting detail on the edge of wood, like a cove or and that?
Like a plow plane or something along those lines?
They're a molding plane. They do to make the fancy crown molds and stuff like that.
No, those are expensive. I go for affordable. My opinion is I can do beadwork with my spoke shaves. I can't do some of the fancy carving with these, but I can make beads and OGs and a variety of fancier styling on wood. But that's a good point. The gentleman asked if I had any of the side molding planes or any of the molding planes. I don't, but I think I can compensate with that. I like the older woodworking where you can I hand cut dovetails and I do smooth joinery with these hand tools, and there's these are all fantastic time-saving tools, but these can do the same thing as those machines there. I was a really young kid. I watched my granddad make a table with no screws or nails or anything, and I'm not there yet, but I'm working towards it. That's my idea of fun.
Ballpark price figures that you pay for different models.
Okay, the gentleman asked about prices for some of these.
That's a big variation.
It's a condition thing predominantly, but generally if they're in good shape, this I would say was $300 for this, and it goes down. And some of the specialty planes are going to be a little bit higher, less of them made. You don't ever see these. The spoke shave like this is probably in the $150 to $200 range. You just don't see them on the market. So if you ever do, you need to jump on it because it'll go quick. There are some specialty antique hand tool sites on the internet, but they're very proud of them. They really love their tools, and everybody does. And that's about the only place that you can find some of these. Like I said, these bigger ones are I got the smaller ones at flea markets and garage sales and stuff, and these bigger ones were my granddad because he had wagon wheels and old grain cutters and harvesters with wheels on them, and I never saw him do it, but my dad said he would have one in his pocket every day and take a look at all the spokes on the wagon wheels and true them up, and that's the way they did it 100 and something years ago, because they didn't have any current bushes and they couldn't plug anything in. So yeah, that's what got me interested in woodworking, is the satisfaction of working with your hands and making something.
On the one lathe, can you show us how the scraper?
This guy?
Yeah, is that blade 90 degrees?
It almost is. I have it slightly over 90. This would probably be in the 105 to 110.
Okay.
This is a different kind of blade. To work with this, it's like a scraper. Like if you would have to burnish a scraper. What I do is I completely grind the edge off of it, grind it flat, and then with a burnishing tool, I'll burnish a curl on it, on one edge, on the bottom edge, and if for some reason a couple of swipes with the burnisher makes an outstanding uniform edge on this thing. I can't explain why. It has to do with the properties of steel, but it makes a nice little curl on there that takes a beautiful shavings. And by this thing working on a flat surface or on a nice figural wood makes a beautiful fine shavings on it. It just works like a champ. On cabinet facings and that type of thing. This gets used a lot on those type of things, but yeah.
When you sharpen it, you sharpen it to the burr.
To the burr, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, create that little curl burr on it. Yep.
It's the same thing, but the blades too. You sharpen to the burr. Without the burr, it's not sharp.
It's exactly the same concept. And again, as you're smoothing and scraping, you can, or I prefer to move it continually forward into 105, 110, 115, 120 to get that smaller, more fine carving on there. This is probably just for demonstration purposes as far back as I would ever use it on a scraping job. Anything else? Yes, sir.
What do you know about those old block wood planes?
The old block wood planes, the first generation, that's what came out right about the time of the 1860, about the time of the Civil War. Wooden blocks. It was the easiest way to get a piece of metal blade through a uniform surface, something that they could lock into place. And normally the earlier ones were held in place by a piece of wood that you knocked in with a hammer. And you could just loosen that a little bit and adjust the blade on there. Those were excellent for hogging large swaths of wood on a slab. Intricate work developed over time. When the molding planes, like the gentleman was talking about, with the different type of beads on it, those developed shortly after that, and they made a nice work on the
Things like handrails,
rails. Yeah, if you could put a bead on the bottom of a handrail.
cove out the sides of it.
Cove out. Yep, absolutely. They quickly went out of favor for the wooden planes. Quit being made about 1870, in the 1870s somewhere. If you see one online, the ones that were used are probably pretty beat up. I would be very cautious about buying those online because there are a lot of spurious ones out there, because they did have, later on in their development, they did have a metal top, a steel top that held the blade in place, and they're easy to replicate. The ones that were actually used are probably thrown away or beat, and it should look pretty haggard if you're in the market for that kind of thing. But you can make your own today very, very easily if you want to get that deep into it. The only thing I would caution would be that it's even more fiddling with the blade than there is with steel or metal tools. So yeah, I would just be careful about the survivors. The survivors are really expensive. The really nice ones that have the proper stamping on them and the wood and all the pieces and parts are there. They're going to be pretty expensive. That's probably the cheapest thing here is this little violin plane with probably $20. A wooden plane that's a survivor of 150 years of woodworking and use is probably going to be warped, very hard to true up and flatten. As a collector's item, yeah, they look great, but as a user of this old stuff, I like these. That's as far back in history as as I want to go, really. But yeah, they're out there. They're definitely out there. Okay. Without further ado, I would just, one last word, I would say get into hand tools. Carve it. The satisfaction is unbelievable. We have some of the stuff available here. There's stuff available out there in the world. It's unbelievable satisfaction you'll get from working with hand tools. I certainly enjoy it, and thanks for your attention today. Appreciate it.